Modeling is so important, is really having Black homeschoolers connect in community, because community is always a big part of starting to homeschool. You think you're going to be going to homeschool and you're not going to have any friends, you're not going to know anybody. It's always fun to be able to come alongside kids and they're like, oh, you homeschool too? And you have a fourth grader too? And you have a high school student too? It's that David encouragement, right? And they're like, I'm going to encourage myself. She can do it. I can do it too. And that's what you want.
Hi, welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Zan Tyler podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And if this podcast has been encouraging to you, please leave us a 5-star review. Each review really does help us and helps connect other families like you to the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We post a lot of content there as well. Thanks for joining us for the second part of this important conversation with LaNissir James on the growth of homeschooling in the Black community. LaNissir is the Black Outreach Coordinator for Homeschool Legal Defense Association. She is married to Lorenzo, and together they have 7 amazing children that have been homeschooled or in the process of being homeschooled. Welcome, LaNissir, and stay tuned. I think you're really going to be encouraged. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. So, I also want to talk to you about the work you do at HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Tell me what your role is there.
Yeah, so I'm an educational specialist, and of course, I deal with the topic of high school, but I'm also the Black Outreach Coordinator. And what a distinct pleasure to be able to reach into the Black, Brown community and to help them along the way with homeschooling. I work with a lot of leaders. And you know, Zan, that Black homeschooling is one of the fastest demographics of new homeschoolers, going from like 3% to 16% during the pandemic. I
Okay,
mean,
wait a minute. You mean 3% of the Black community homeschooled before COVID. Afterwards, it's 16%?
well, during COVID, it was
Six,
16%. It was such a big jump. That's a big,
wow.
big
I
jump.
mean, that is a huge jump.
Yes.
What do you think accounts for that?
I think the pandemic was an open window, an open door, if you will, for the Black community to see really what was going on in the classroom, what was going on in the school system concerning their children. And so we see so many different reasons why people were homeschooling. It could be because of bullying. It could be because of the whole academic piece. It could be, the heavy discipline on African American boys. We could go on and on down that list. But I think the pandemic was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was kind of like where people saw what was going on, and that was an opportunity. The whole homeschooling community went from why are you homeschooling to how do you homeschool, right?
Yes,
0 to
that's right.
hero in one pandemic we all
0
went,
to
right?
hero. I like that. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
So I think that's it. And there have been many who've gone back to school, but many who will never forget and who have never forgotten that homeschooling works. And now homeschooling is in the spotlight now just because of that time. It was a difficult time for the entire nation, but it also was a time where homeschool really flourished. And now there are many people who obviously know it was legal before, right? I have to tell the
Right.
story. When I
Yeah,
started
yeah.
homeschooling almost 20 years ago, my husband, who's in law enforcement, said, "Is this legal? Don't have the police at my door." I
And
said,
you said,
"Hon, you are
Lorenzo.
the police."
That's
He said, "Well, don't have my coworkers at my door talking to the girl at the park." right? And that's where HSLDA shows up. You got to call my friends at HSLDA because you want to get the story right. I mean, this is your precious child. You want to get it right. And so that's where I started and fell in love with HSLDA long ago and had no idea that I would be a part of the team. It's my pleasure to serve and, to support the Black community who they have questions. They're 40 years behind a movement that's been around. And so, you heard me, Zan, we were talking privately about how we really need to love on Black homeschoolers because they become a very important part of the homeschooling movement because they're new, their perspective is different. They're coming in really trying to learn some of the benefits of homeschooling, which they didn't know,
Absolutely.
right? No one knew.
Well, okay, so you can, I just want to tell you my story and then you can comment and, or correct me if I'm wrong. So we had probably, Joe and I started in the mid 1980s. I started to say 1880s. Well, not exactly. So it was the mid 1980s. And so then by the '90s, homeschooling is starting to grow. It's become legal in South Carolina or much more easily accessible legally in South Carolina in the early 1900s and in the early what is wrong with me in the early 1990s. And so then we started having a couple of Black friends who began homeschooling, and they were having such a hard time with their families and so when we would get together, and I asked Charlene, why she thought it was that way. She said, "Well, my parents told me we had worked so hard as a community to gain a seat at the table of public education that they felt like traitor is too strong a word, but they felt like they were rejecting that freedom or that place they had fought so hard to win." What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, public education is important to many people who can't homeschool. They can't homeschool for lots of reasons, right? That may be very personal to their family, personal to their health, their ability to home educate their children. And the answer would be public education. But I think that as we have stretched ourselves out of our comfort zone, we realize that you can homeschool and work. You can homeschool and, be active in, the church or in sports, et cetera, et cetera. We found ways that homeschooling can work, and we also found those who can support homeschooling. Parents need to, obviously direct the education of their children. We believe in, parental rights, but you can have someone else teach your science class if you hate chemistry, right?
Yeah,
And we're
right, right.
so we're finding ways that it can work, and I think that's what the pandemic did. It helped us lean in to say, how does this work? Now, of course, during the pandemic, that was not homeschooling, okay? We were all in lockdown. That's not
Yeah.
homeschooling.
Yeah,
But now
that's right.
right, but
That's right.
now that people are seeing what homeschool looks like, how expressful, how homeschoolers are expressed in the community and that we're not having socialization issues. Some homeschoolers are very articulate, right? Well spoken, very connected to their family. In fact, when my kids go to college and they show up at office hours, right? No, the professors have an office hours and they get there and they're like, "You guys are homeschool, aren't you?" They're like, "Yeah."
Oh,
Right?
that's so interesting. Okay, tell me why that is. Why are the homeschoolers the ones showing up for office hours?
Well, I think it's because they're comfortable with the interaction of talking about education with an adult, right? In
Yeah, and
homeschooling, you have
they're comfortable talking to adults. I think
yes,
that's a key too.
yes,
Yes.
yes, but even about your education, because so many kids don't wanna come to another adult when they need help on the math question, right?
That is yes, that's an excellent point. That
So
is
they
so
come, in
true.
homeschooling, we have nothing to lose, nothing to prove. We're after mastery. We're not teaching tests, we're after the mastery. And and so if there's a question, guess what? They march to our office hours, which i.e. is going to ask mama, right?
Yes, that's
Mama has office hours too. I
right.
had to create this basket and I was like, everything that you need help on, guys, put it in the basket. And when mommy has her time, she's gonna go in here and go through and see all your questions. And so that was office hours, right?
That is yes, yes, that's hilarious, but that is absolutely true, absolutely true. So, what have you done specifically to encourage homeschooling in the Black community?
Well,
Have
I
you
think
hosted events? Do you speak at events? Tell us all the myriad of things you do.
yeah, so I think modeling is so important, is really having Black homeschoolers connect in community because community is always a big part of starting to homeschool. You think you're going to homeschool and you're not going to have any friends, you're not going to know anybody. And so being able to be a part of community. We just did an event. The HSLDA was a sponsor for a HEAV convention. That was their reception. Just showing up at the reception, I saw the faces of the people there who were just so excited to be in the room.
Was it a reception for Black homeschoolers?
Yes.
Is that what it was? Okay,
Yes,
okay,
Black Outreach Reception, it was
okay.
great. And then we also travel and we help, local, out of the area, I shouldn't say locally. We traveled to Georgia and we had a chance to be a part of the Flourish Conference. So they're doing conferences and we're able to come support, bring material, and just encourage, be speakers, whatever it is that's needed in the community, encourage the leaders along the way. So that's always exciting. And then connecting them with their attorneys. A lot of times a homeschooler is new to homeschooling and they don't understand the law, right? They don't understand. They've gotten this story or the scary story off the internet, right? They got the wrong states. You're on the internet and that might not be your homeschool law for your state. They need to be connected. And so that's an opportunity for us to connect them to the attorneys at HSLDA. Maybe they're a homeschool leader and they're starting a new co-op and they need to be connected to Darren Jones and that whole department of group services. And so it's a bridge, as a liaison to be able to help in the community, just like we do for the Hispanic community and the military community. People really need modeling. They need people that's in a situation similar to them that they can connect with. And so that's what really it becomes. And so it's always fun to be able to come alongside kids and they're like, "Oh, you homeschool too? And you have a fourth grader too? And you have a high school student too?" It's that David encouragement, right? And they're like, "I'm gonna encourage myself. She can do it, I can do it too." And that's what you want.
Okay, that's amazing. And so now the growth that happened through COVID, are you seeing a lot of that stick around and more growth continuing?
Yes, I think it's sticking around because people now know. And so now as we move into this, we're what, 5 years from COVID, how many years we are from COVID, you're seeing this new movement of people who've heard about it now. Right. So now it's a part of history, if you will, that, so if you Google Black homeschooling, everything's going to explode on your Google and talk about the explosive, growth of it. And so that gives encouragement to the new people who are coming to say, "Can I do this?" And they're like, "Hey, it's a story here. It's a story here. It's a story here." And I think that that's the beauty of why Black homeschooling is still growing in a very, very upward way, because people know that it's possible, that it can be done, and that many people have done it.
Well, I think at the graduation you hosted, I mean, that you put on in Maryland, what would you say the racial mix was there? Maybe
Yeah.
70% Black?
Well, it was Hispanic. So
Okay.
we had Hispanic, we had
You had
Black, we
Black.
had white. I really think it was a whole representation of heaven. It was just a little bit of everybody there, but you're right. It was a place where Black and brown, Black and Hispanic people were coming out, because I think one of the problems that most of the state orgs are having is that they're having phenomenal conferences. But how do you get the people who are homeschooling out? And it's really being able to create a safe space to say, "Hey, I welcome you." And a lot of times we'll have, literature and we'll have, faces who are African American on it, but it won't draw people out. And a lot of times they need a person to say, "Hey, it's safe over here. Come out. Bring your children. Bring your husband. Bring your questions. Bring your fears, your doubts," right? Because homeschooling is not easy, right? It can be done. So they want to be able to come to a place where they can connect. And we just hope that what we're doing at Machi, Maryland Association of Christian Home Educator, is a welcome mat for those who need help in homeschooling, no matter what race you are.
Yeah, I mean, at that graduation, it was so phenomenally blended. I cannot tell you how encouraged I was and how many great conversations I had with so many people afterwards, students and adults. It was
Yeah.
just such a highlight of the year for us. It was
Oh,
like you said, a kind of a taste of heaven.
yes.
And everybody was happy, everybody was celebrating,
Yes.
and it was a great time to be together.
Yes.
So so what do you think is significant for the whole homeschooling community that we have so many more Black and brown homeschoolers, um, homeschooling?
Yeah, I think what's significant is unity, in that it's a community that has already existed. and Black homeschoolers are now coming into it, which is great. And I really believe that we can all work together. I think as we are seeing all kinds of bad legislation pop up in different states, bringing your voice to it matters. I cannot tell you how many times that, I've been in the Maryland legislature and introduced myself as the homeschooler, the shock, right, that comes upon the face of those, oh, you homeschool. Oh, right.
Yes, okay.
It's exciting to see, that homeschooling it looks different, right? It's just it's so many different people, so many races, so many ethnicities of people who are embracing home education. And I think that when our legislators see it, that it's their constituents, no matter where they are on the map, that are homeschooling, I think it's an impact that is just priceless. And I think for such a time as this, God has brought us all together in homeschooling to support homeschooling for the next 40 years.
Well, amen to that because we do need unity and we do need to be working together because we're seeing threats to homeschool freedom that we haven't seen in decades.
Hey.
And I think it's really important that, as communities we work together.
Yes, yes. Because one thing about legislation, it does hit everybody, right?
Yes, that's right. It affects us all
All,
equally.
right.
Yes, yes. When we were talking on the podcast last week about this legislation in New Jersey
Yes.
and where they want homeschoolers to meet with, with a representative of the school superintendent. So it's a
Unbelievable.
nurse or a social worker or somebody else that has nothing to do with the education of the child. But yet
Unbelievable.
they said that's their opportunity to seek counsel from the school district if they need it for their homeschooling. And by the way, we're going to do a well check on all of your children.
Unbelievable. And I'm from New Jersey. That's my home state. And it's
Okay.
just unbelievable. And another bill has recently popped up. It's just unbelievable.
So tell us, just so new homeschoolers know, what is so egregious about first having to appear in person with all of your children, and secondly, talk about this aspect of them doing a well check on all of your kids. You might not even be able to stay in the room with your kids when this happens.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, they're not doctors, you know what I mean? We get to choose our doctors, and we also get to choose the people who we think needs to do a well check on our children. I'm very intentional about how I pick a pediatrician, and so your definition of well and my definition of well might not be the same, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's
And as
right.
an educator, I'm not really sure of, the thought behind that. I just think that that's excessive. They probably need to do that with the kids in the public school who could probably use a lot more support from them as opposed to coming to the homeschooling because most of the parents have taken responsibility for their children and they're well able to get whatever help is necessary for their children. And a lot of times it is not through the public school. My son who sees speech pathology, I choose to use my insurance to pick the right speech pathologist that will support what it is that we're doing homeschooling. So we have a speech pathologist who is, unique to homeschooling. And I think it's the same thing. So to ask homeschoolers to come into a public school environment is just unbelievable, ridiculous.
So now you were getting ready to talk about another bill that's been introduced.
Yes, yeah. So there's 2, and of course, I don't have the bill numbers, and I'm sure if you go to HSLDA.org, they're gonna have the bill, and Scott Woodruff's gonna tell you all about it, and then Will Estrada and our awesome Jim Mason, and we encourage you because even if you're not in New Jersey, it affects all of us. It affects all of
Amen.
us. So
Because if that bill passes there, it sets precedents,
that's right.
and you better believe other state legislators are looking at what's working and what's not working.
That's right. That's right.
And we sure don't want to set that kind of precedence.
Right.
That is terrible. So, now when I know when we were at the graduation, you were telling your folks to get involved in some aspect civically, and I can't remember what it was about.
Yes, in the state of Maryland. Yeah, so we have a review of our homeschool law and, get connected to your state organization. I know that people are watching your amazing podcast from all over the nation. It is so important that you connect with your state organization and you can go to, Homeschool Freedom and go to the alliance, and they're going to show you who your state organization is, and get connected. You're in South Carolina, I'm in Maryland. There's a new one coming in New Jersey. There, every single state. And that's going to be the pulse, the foundation of what's going on with your state. And you want to be a part. You want to get up to the Capitol days. They're so important. I know you know how important Capitol days are, Zan.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
It's a
Absolutely.
live civics class. I mean, you don't want to miss it. And more importantly, your legislator needs to meet you. It's different when they meet the person who
Okay,
lives in that
talk
zip code.
talk about that a little bit. Tell
Yeah.
parents how to meet their legislators, LaNissir.
Right. And so first you want to go ahead and Google and find out who it is. I mean, we shouldn't be voting for people who we haven't learned a lot about, right?
Yes,
And
that's
find out
right.
who they are. Find out when the legislative session is for your state. Find out what's going on in your state organization, right? They're probably having a Capitol Day, and join in, because it's even better than you just going a day where there are no other homeschoolers. I mean, we had over 700 people registered for the Maryland General Assembly for our Capitol Day. We had 400 plus that showed up, and what an impact it made to, the campus on that day, right? They
Yes,
have homeschoolers from corner
absolutely.
to corner, and it's a great day for you to go in and say, "Hi, I live in your district.
Okay,
I'm the."
let's talk about that a minute. Constituents have real power with
Yes.
their legislators. I
Yes.
mean, it doesn't mean we still need to contact committee members of the House Education or the Senate Education Committee member, but when you connect with your constituent,
Yes.
you represent a vote.
Yes.
And probably if when you speak out, you're representing 500 other people, because not many people exercise
Right.
their freedom and get to know a representative or
Mm.
senator.
That's right. And it matters, and they put a real face, right? They put a face with homeschooling, and it's your face, right? And you may be the only person that they met, right? Or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So it's so important that you tell them a little bit about them, about yourself. We actually, for Machi, we have the kids write letters to the legislators and color pictures, and give cookies and just all kinds of things to develop a relationship. You never know when you need to really call your legislator. So now it's, hey, I met such and such, Senator blah blah or Delegate blah blah, and I'm calling now because I'm concerned about this homeschool bill. It
Yes,
make it makes
yes.
a difference. It
And
really does.
and when you have that relationship, when they vote, they're putting a face with that vote instead
Yes,
and making it personal rather than philosophical.
that's right.
And that's what we need. They need to see us as their constituents. We're real people. We're concerned about this. We love the process of freedom.
Yes,
We're getting our kids involved. All of these things it says when you get to know your legislator is pretty
yes,
powerful.
yes. And it's the history. When you bring your kids along, I mean, they're the next generation of leaders rising up.
Amen.
And
That's
there
right.
they are. They're 9 years old right now, right? They're 7, they're 6, they're 5, they're 10, they're 16, and they're right there, and they will never forget the time that you
Mhm.
took the time to take them up to the Capitol.
One thing too is invite your senator, your state senator or legislator or delegate, whatever you call them, assemblyman, to your co-op to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
And if you're intimidated one on one, that is a great way to have a senator or legislator in to see how well these kids are doing and to see this large group of homeschoolers. So then you all have a chance to meet with him or with her.
Yes, that's great.
But I love that, and you're right, it is a legacy. I just have to tell you this real quick. Um, so when I was in high school, there were no Teen Pact or Generation Joshua organizations where you could learn about government, but there was Girls State and Boys State that's sponsored by the American Legion. Both of our dads had fought in World War II, and my granddaddy fought in World War I. And so I was very familiar with that. But I was one of 2 girls from our school that represented our school at Girls State, and 2 girls from every school in the state. And so I was elected governor. And it was such an opportunity to understand the process, to be in the state house, understand it, get to meet senators, get to meet representatives, learn to speak, learn how a bill becomes a law, and it takes the mystique or intimidation out of it. So I would say, and then both of my sons, my daughter went to Girl State and Boy State. John's very involved in state government as chief legal counsel for the State Department of Education, and now his son's at Boy State. And so you see the generations begin to understand freedom and pick up that mantle. Something you said really triggered all those thoughts. Sorry, I didn't mean to take off on a riff with that,
That's
but
good, Zan. That's
it's
good.
just powerful. We want our kids to be familiar with the way that government works
Yes,
so they're not scared to be involved.
that's right. I love that. And that they're elected officials. They're people just like you and I, and they don't know what they don't know if we don't give an opportunity
Yeah,
to give
that's
your
so
testimony, to share.
that is so, so true. So so now we know, all right, I wanna go back and tell this story a little bit. When you were at the University of Maryland and you wanted to be in broadcast journalism, tell us the persistence it required on your part. And
Wow.
Tim Russert, I just always loved him. So
Yeah,
tell us
yes.
about that a little bit.
Well, shameless plug to the University of Maryland. We do have an outstanding journalism department from an alumni. It's been 34 years. But when I was coming up, Connie Chung and Jim Henson were graduates of the journalism department. It's really hard to get into. And if you think AI is new, I want you to know that we had Kermit years and years ago. Okay, folks? And Kermit, by the way, was like the keynote speaker for this graduation at the University of Maryland. I loved it. It was just hilarious. But I want you to know that it was hard to get in. And I had gotten an internship at the NBC News, and it was a blessing because Tim Russert was my boss, and I was having trouble getting into the Department of Journalism, and he was the person that really did change my life. We do miss Tim Russert. He
Yeah,
was phenomenal.
tell him what his position was
Yeah,
there
he
and
was the bureau chief at NBC News. He was the
for
bureau chief.
Washington, D.C., right?
Washington, yes,
Okay,
bureau
yeah,
chief.
that's pretty
And
heavy.
anyway, they mentored a lot of students in the building, and I was one of them. And I would get up literally at the crack of dawn because I was at one point on a live morning news show, the Today Show, at 7 a.m. So we had to be in the building more like 5, 4, right? Really pretty early. And that was my life, even as a student at the University of Maryland. And so taking all the journalism classes, I really just loved broadcast journalism. And Tim changed my life because he was the person who said, "Hey, come get a letter from me, kid. Take this to your dean." And it really changed my life. And I will never forget his most famous words was, "Go get him, kid." And so go get him. And here I was. I graduated in 3 years from the University of Maryland. It's unheard of. And so uh, I always say that now. So when I get a chance to launch, students, which I do on obviously
Mm,
on big
mm,
scales, right? I
right,
always say,
right.
"Go get them, kid. Go get them.
Okay. That's
Go
right.
get
And
'em."
so your journalism experience just reminds me a little bit of what it takes to be involved civically, and that is real tenacity. If
Yes.
you don't get attention or make any inroads the first time, you can't just go home.
Yes.
You figure out a different way to meet your legislator, a different way to have impact, and you keep showing up.
Yes.
And sometimes it's gonna be at inconvenient times, like you had to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning. The legislature freedom doesn't run on our homeschool schedule,
That's
but
right.
the great thing about it is we have our kids with us, and so
Yes.
when we get that call, we can go.
Yes.
And when I was doing this article on capital days and the importance of them for the HSLDA court report, one of the things that surprised me, and I love learning new things, the longer you live, was I had several legislators and then several people running Capitol Days who said the same thing. Legislators love it because it's the only time they see families at their Capitol building. Isn't that powerful? Take your family. I mean, your children need to be old enough to behave, because you're going to be sitting still in meetings and you're going to be on a big state house or capitol grounds where you need to have control over them. But just in terms of them not running off and getting lost, that kinds of thing. But I would really encourage you to be a frequent flyer at your state house.
I love it. Frequent flyer. I love it. I love that.
Be there. So
Yes.
so as we close, LaNissir, Is there anything else you want to say, just about this whole significance, the shift in the demographics, a little bit of homeschooling through COVID, and the power and the beauty of that?
Yeah, just move in the I always talk about move at the speed of your family. I think God has us all in a season of our lives. Maybe you have teenage kids, maybe you have little kids, maybe you're somewhere in the middle. Maybe you're new to homeschooling and you just want to get on board. I think move in the speed that God has put you. You know, Ecclesiastes talks about how life all has a season. There's a time under the sun. And so for such a time as this, you're in the season of being very interested in homeschooling and fall in love with it. Get mentors, connect with the past. You know, I think sometimes we have this generation who says, I want to do it a new way. New way is great. Innovation is great. But you also want to know that you're standing on the shoulders of someone who's gone before you. And you want to find out that story. It's kind of like finding out grandma's story and great grandma's story because that becomes a part of your story. And that's why that's such a big part of my homeschooling is to connect the kids to their grandmother and their great grandmother and their history because it helps them become stronger as they go forward. When you know where you've come from, there's no stopping you to where you're going.
I gotta ask you one more thing. So, for all the moms and dads who are listening and they know all these myriad of things you've done, by the way, while you have 7 kids and you're homeschooling, how did you do that all? How did you run those businesses, work at HSLDA, homeschool 7 kids, help them become entrepreneurs? How did you do all of that simultaneously?
Yeah, you have to say yes to the Lord. I think that he orchestrates your steps, you know, he orders your steps and it didn't all fall together in one day. I didn't get 7 children all in one day. You know, you're looking at decades and decades of what he's unfolded and when he gives you a gift, you know, you have to use the gift. You don't want it to sit dormant. You want to be able to use what's in your hands. And so people say, "How do you do it?" And I always say, "Get my mom's manual and unfold." You would be surprised the gifts that God has given you that you can use right here, right now. I mean, like that journalism story, it's 3 decades old, right? But I'm using it right now with you, Zan, right? That University of Maryland degree and all of those broadcast journalism classes that I took, you know, it was dormant during the years I had young kids, right? I wasn't participating in podcasts. We didn't have podcasts then,
That's
right?
right, that's
We
true
had the
too.
internet BC before computers. Right? But
That's
God will give you something and sometime it will lay dormant. You're in the season. And when your season comes to use it, you'll be able to use it. Same thing with the entrepreneurship. I've been in direct sales over 30 years ago. Right. And so who would know that I had kids who were interested in entrepreneurship and I will be able to help them. And the same thing with writing, working on another book project. Well, I've been writing all my life, you know? So you know, just move in the season that God gives you. He's prepared you for such a time as this. So just say yes to the Lord and he will work out all the other details.
and include your kids in what you're doing. I mean,
Yes.
obviously, if you're writing a book, they're not gonna be sitting there writing with you, but you can explain the process, you can help them
Yes.
write while you're writing. There are all kinds of ways to bring your children in so that your mission becomes their mission.
Yes.
And your passion may not be their passion, but I think it's through this process that you help them find their passions.
That's right. And you saw them at the graduation and
I know, I loved
they loved
every
you.
minute of it. Oh my goodness, being with your family, Joe and I still talk about it.
And we enjoy Joe too. It's never
Never a
and
dull
you
moment.
guys survived the Layla. Layla asked Joe and Zan a 50 million question and they survive. I took a picture afterward. I was like, you survived the Layla questions.
She is so she's your 7-year-old, and she can talk 90 miles a minute, and
Yes.
she is so delightful. I mean,
Yes.
we had so much fun.
Yes.
So, okay. So, well, LaNissir, tell people how they can find you.
Yes. So they can find me at LaNissirJames.com. If you could spell my name and put .com next to it, you'll be able to find me. And everything that I shared about HSLDA, you can go to hslda.org. Our friends there can help you through the homeschool law. They're advocates for homeschool freedom. And, you know, I'm just excited. This is exciting, Zan. Thank you for
Mm.
having me on
Um,
again. This is my third time.
I
Third time's a
know it.
charm.
That's right. Third time is a charm. Hey, for those of you who are listening, not watching, LaNissir, I'm going to spell your name.
Yes.
And so LANISSIR. So your website is lanissirjames.com, right?
Yes,
Okay.
LaNissirJames.com.
Okay, great. And as always, you can find me at zantyler.com. We appreciate your listening to the podcast or viewing it. We know you have lots of demands on your time, so thank you so much for being with us, and may God bless you and your family in the coming week and months. God bless. Bye.